everyone, and welcome to the Power of N, where N is equal to networking. And we continue with our episodes about finding out the best in the market to talk about networking and what else you can do to be that next person in the line, whether it is about job, making connections, it's all about networking, right? And in this world of us being so global, networking has more power than you can ever imagine. So our guest today is Buzz Hayes. I think a lot of you have heard his name at our questioning forum. He'll be the first one to raise hand, ask questions. Has an amazing background currently at Google, but has done a lot of production and have met a lot of Hollywood stars. And we shouldn't talk about the name of the stars. But Buzz, welcome to the show. And without further ado, I'm going to ask our key questions and then you take it away. What are your tips and tricks for networking? And how has that helped you? Or give us a practical example to take us home.
So I grew up in a little town in the northeast of the United States, and it was a very provincial sort of an area where people didn't seem to have ambition to leave the confines of where we grew up. Right? They lived in the same neighborhood as their parents. Often, when they were able to have their own house, their grandparents lived down the street. It was very family oriented, but no one had any notion of what the bigger world looks like. And I had a hint through a relative of mine, an aunt who had traveled to Germany when she was in college. And I was so intrigued by this idea that somebody actually left the confines of where we were to go to another place. And I think, honestly, that was one of the key moments for me to see that there's a bigger world out there. And so that also led me to, in my career, I've had to meet a lot of people. And I was painfully shy as a child. I wouldn't even make eye contact with most people. And so I finally learned how to make eye contact. But then what I realized was it was just important to just get over that initial fear of saying hello to somebody. Don't be nervous about introducing yourself to someone. And honestly, the worst they can say is, no, I don't have time right now, or I'm not interested, whatever. But don't take that as some sort of personal insult or whatever. Just go with it. But have the courage to make that little bit of eye contact and just get their attention and say hello and have something to say, right? And that's one of the challenges I think you always find with networking is knowing what is it that you need to say, or how do you follow up on a question, things like that. So for me, I've learned, because I felt this on the receiving end, it's always good to be in a situation where people put you at ease so that you can then freely speak about something, as opposed to putting you on the spot and saying, so what do you think? And you don't have anything to add to it. So that's all part of networking, is that chemistry that you come up with between people. And how can you allow the space between the words so that people can actually feel a connection?
Love that. Buzz, what do you recommend for in this virtual world, right? I mean, people are slowly trying to come out and have events which are hybrid. But what is your tips and tricks for in this virtual world where it's very difficult to do the networking? Any idea? What are you doing now?
Yeah, so in the virtual world, it's interesting because my team that I represent here at Google is all over the world, basically.
Mm.
No two of us are in the same state, let alone the same city at this point. So networking takes an additional bit of effort. I was working with folks for 2.5 years that I never actually met in person. So you have a relationship online that the first time you meet in person, you realize there's an icebreaker moment you have where it's like, I'm finally meeting you in person, and we all look different in person. We're not confined to a little box, and so interestingly, we have something to talk about that is very common to us, even if we've never met, because we've all lived through this virtual experience, right, together. So that tends to be a little bit of an icebreaker that then gets us into conversation, gives us something to talk about, and then something to follow on as part of a networking conversation. And I found it actually quite valuable. Now, with my own team, of course, you come up with a shorthand, so you understand how to communicate this way. And the thing that's missing for most people is eye contact, right? And body language. I think even if you don't recognize that body language is important to you, you will find that the lack of it will reveal itself as to an important element that you're missing. So I think whether we understand the science of body language or not, you can always tell by someone repositioning in a chair after you ask something or looking away or something like that, that something is either amiss, or they're thinking about something, or the conversation needs to go in another direction. And so when it comes to these virtual interactions, we tend to miss a lot of cues like that. So we have to be a little more sort of honest in the conversation part, because that's the one thing that we can still do, whether we're in person or remote.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Buzz, for your time. And I'm sure that people would appreciate the tip over here is, as much as this sound like everybody knows it, not everybody does it, which is looking into the eye, having that eye contact and starting the conversation. Like you said, the worst that can happen is someone will just stand up and walk away. That means you have an additional plate of food to eat. But other than that, I think it's a fantastic way to just connect with people, and also to make sure you do follow up, right? Because once you do a connection over there,
Absolutely.
people, the memory is blurred.
And
So
that takes effort,
that's
right?
another way.
That takes some
Mhm.
additional effort, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
I totally get it. And I think, again, having been a painfully shy child, I understand where people come from. Um, it's a funny analogy, but I heard somebody once say, how can you tell when you're speaking with an extroverted engineer? Not to pick on engineers. And I said, I don't
Yeah.
know. How do you do? And they said, they stare at your shoes while they're talking to you. And it made me laugh because it was like, I get it, because I was that kid that stared at the floor, and you're having a conversation with somebody and you don't want to make the eye contact. And it's awkward for that person.
Mhm.
And for you, you're just kind of closing off and you're not receptive to conversation. So part of this is you just opening yourself up to be receptive to conversation, even if you don't have anything to say. Be a good listener. That works too.
That's amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much, Buzz. And I'm sure that everybody got a lot to take from the interview today. Always remember that there is a lot of power in networking. Start with your group first. I think we have our workspace group, workplace, and we have about over 4,500 people over there. How many are you getting to connect, not just on that platform, but on LinkedIn? So there is power in networking. Unleash the power and make sure you follow us on our next episode. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you for the opportunity.